The sound wasn't a bark. It was a frantic, guttural, tearing noise, the sound of claws shredding nylon and striking the frozen earth with the rhythm of a jackhammer. It was 2:17 a.m. in the dense wooded patch behind the old abandoned textile mill in Granite Falls, Washington, a place where the city lights didn't reach, and the only residents were the ghosts of industry and the people society had decided to stop seeing. Officer Mark Reynolds shone his flashlight into the darkness, his hand resting on the grip of his service weapon. The dispatch call had been a noise complaint from the security guard at the nearby storage facility. Screaming man, vicious animal, possible assault. What Reynolds saw when the beam cut through the mist wasn't an assault. It was an excavation. A blue FEMA tarp tent, the kind used by the long-term homeless, was collapsing. A man was on his knees in the mud, sobbing, trying to wrap his arms around a dog. The dog, a golden retriever mix with matted fur and a frame that showed every rib, was possessed. It wasn't attacking the man. It was attacking the floor of the tent. It had already shredded the bottom of the tarp and was digging into the mud underneath with a manic, bloody-pawed intensity that was terrifying to watch. "Stop it! Buster, stop it!" the man screamed, his voice raw. He pulled at the dog's collar, but the animal was immovable, a 70-pound anchor of muscle and instinct. The dog snapped at the dirt, whining a high-pitched keening sound that made the hair on Reynolds' arms stand up. "Police!" Reynolds shouted, stepping into the clearing. "Step away from the animal." The man, known on the streets as Elias, looked up. He was 60, with a face mapped by exposure and eyes that held a terrified innocence. "Officer, help me," Elias pleaded. "He's gone crazy. He won't stop. He's going to tear his paws off." Reynolds saw the blood mixed with the mud. The dog's nails were broken, bleeding, but he didn't slow down. He was digging as if something alive was underneath that dirt. "I need you to grab his leash, sir," Reynolds commanded. "Pull him back." "I can't," Elias wept. "He's seeing something I can't see." Reynolds holstered his gun and moved in. He wasn't going to shoot a dog that was clearly in distress rather than aggressive. He grabbed the scruff of the dog's neck while Elias hugged the torso. Together, straining against the animal's hysterical strength, they dragged Buster back 3 feet. The dog collapsed, panting, staring at the hole he had dug. He let out a howl, a sound so full of sorrow it silenced the surrounding woods. Reynolds shined his light into the hole. It was about 2 feet deep. The mud was dark and loose, but at the bottom of the hole, reflecting the LED beam, was something that shouldn't have been in the middle of the woods. It was a patch of bright, unnatural blue. Not a rock, not a root. It was plastic. Reynolds felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. "Sir, how long have you been camped here?" 2 days, Elias stammered, stroking the trembling dog. "Just 2 days. The ground was flat. It was dry." Reynolds looked at the dog. Buster wasn't digging for a bone. He wasn't digging for a mole. Reynolds reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is 4 Alpha. I need a CSI unit and a shovel at the old mill, and get the detective on call. We found something." By 4 a.m., the woods were lit up by floodlights that turned the night into a stark, clinical white. Detective Sarah Halloway stood by the police tape, sipping coffee that did nothing to warm the chill in her bones. She watched the forensics team carefully widen the hole Buster had started. Elias was sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket with Buster asleep on his lap. The dog's paws were bandaged. He was finally calm, as if his job was done. "He's a stray?" Sarah asked Reynolds. "Yeah. Elias says the dog found him about 6 months ago. Says he's usually the chillest dog in the world. Never barks. Tonight he just woke up and started tearing the tent apart." Sarah looked at the hole. "Dogs smell decomposition, Reynolds, even without training. If there's a body down there—" "I don't think it's a body," Reynolds said. "The shape is wrong. They hit something hard." "Detective!" One of the CSI techs waved from the pit. Sarah walked over, her boots squelching in the mud. The techs had cleared away the dirt. Embedded in the earth was a large, heavy-duty Pelican case, the kind used for expensive camera equipment or firearms. It was sealed with layers of industrial duct tape and wrapped in thick plastic sheeting. It wasn't a coffin. It was a time capsule. "Pull it," Sarah ordered. It took 2 men to hoist the case out of the mud. It was heavy. They set it on a portable table. The silence in the clearing was heavy. Everyone knew that whatever was inside that case wasn't going to be good. You don't bury a pelican case 4 feet deep in the woods unless you want it to stay hidden forever. "Open it," Sarah said. The tech used a scalpel to slice through the layers of tape. He popped the latches. The hiss of the air seal breaking sounded like a gasp. He lifted the lid. Sarah leaned in. She expected drugs. She expected guns. She expected cash. She didn't expect the smell of lavender laundry detergent. Inside the case, neatly folded and preserved in vacuum-sealed bags, were clothes. A small pair of jeans with butterfly patches on the knees, a pink t-shirt with a glittery unicorn, a pair of light-up sneakers, size 3, and on top of the clothes lay a spiral-bound notebook and a disposable camera. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She reached out with a gloved hand and picked up the notebook. On the cover, written in purple marker, were the words, "Emma's Diary. Keep out." Sarah Holloway stopped breathing. She knew that name. Every cop in Washington state knew that name, Emma Miller. 10 years ago, 6-year-old Emma Miller had vanished from a playground 3 miles from here. It was the biggest manhunt in the county's history. It was the case that broke the previous sheriff. There were no leads, no witnesses, no body. Just a little girl who evaporated into the mist. And here, beneath a homeless man's tent, were her clothes. "Oh my God," Reynolds whispered, looking at the unicorn shirt. "That's what she was wearing on the flyers." Sarah turned to look at Elias and the dog. The dog, Buster, lifted his head and looked right at Sarah. He didn't wag his tail. He just stared, his amber eyes solemn. That dog hadn't smelled a body. He had smelled the scent of a child, preserved in plastic, leaking out through a microscopic crack in the seal. "Get that camera to the lab," Sarah ordered, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Now! And get Elias a hotel room. He's not a suspect, he's a witness. And that dog just cracked the case of the decade." The interrogation room was warm, a stark contrast to the woods. Sarah sat across from Elias. He looked terrified. "I didn't know," Elias kept saying. "I swear, Detective, I just pitched the tent there because the ground was soft." "I believe you, Elias," Sarah said gently. "The soil analysis shows that Box has been buried for at least 5 years. You've only been in town for 6 months." "Then why did Buster dig?" Elias asked. "He never digs." "Because the seal on the box failed," Sarah said. "We found a hairline fracture in the plastic, just enough for a scent to escape. And Buster, he has a nose for things that don't belong." Sarah stood up. "Elias, we're going to put you up in temporary housing. You and Buster. But I need you to think. In the 2 days you were camped there, did you see anyone? Anyone watching you? Anyone lingering?" Elias frowned, thinking hard. "Not really, just the usual. Kids on bikes, and the guy in the truck." Sarah froze. "What guy in the truck?" "Green pickup, older Ford. Came down the access road yesterday morning, said he was checking the power lines. He stopped and looked at my tent for a long time. Asked me how long I planned to stay." "Did you get a look at him?" "Yeah, older guy, gray crew cut, wore a vest, had a scar on his chin." Sarah's heart hammered. "Reynolds," she yelled at the glass. "Pull up the file on the Emma Miller Search Party volunteers from 2014. The lab developed the disposable camera within the hour. The photos were mundane at first, a birthday party, a cat sleeping on a sofa, a selfie of a little girl making a funny face. But the last 3 photos were different. They weren't taken by Emma. They were taken of Emma. She was sitting in a room with wood paneling. She looked scared. She was holding a newspaper. And in the corner of the frame, reflected in a mirror on the wall, was the photographer. It was a partial shot, just a torso and a hand holding the camera. But on the hand was a ring, a distinctive, heavy gold ring with a ruby stone and an insignia. Sarah magnified the image on her monitor. Granite Falls High, class of 1985. Reynolds, Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. Cross-reference the search party volunteers with Granite Falls High alumni, class of 85. It took the computer 3 minutes. One name popped up. David Black, former high school football star, local contractor, and a man who drove a green 1998 Ford F-150. He was a volunteer? Reynolds asked, reading the file. He led the search in Sector 4, the woods behind the mill. He led the search away from the box, Sarah realized. He buried the evidence to keep it as a trophy, and then he steered everyone else in the opposite direction. And Elias camping there. Spooked him, Sarah finished. He drove by to check if the homeless guy had found anything. When he saw the tent right on top of the burial site, he must have panicked. He was probably planning to come back tonight to move it. But the dog beat him to it. Sarah grabbed her jacket. Let's go. SWAT is already gearing up. David Black lived in a split-level ranch house on the edge of town. It was the kind of house that screamed normal. When the armored vehicle rolled up onto his lawn, Black was in his driveway, loading a shovel and a pickaxe into the back of his green Ford. He froze when he saw the lights. "David Black," Sarah shouted over the loudspeaker. "Police, get on the ground." He looked at the shovel. For a second, Sarah thought he might try to use it, but then he looked at the 10 rifles pointed at his chest. He dropped the shovel. He fell to his knees. As they cuffed him, Sarah walked up. She held up the photo of the ring. "Nice ring, David," she said. He looked up at her, his eyes dead. "How?" he whispered. "It was buried 6 feet deep." "You underestimated 2 things," Sarah said, "the weather eroding the seal, and a stray dog named Buster." Inside Black's house, in a hidden panel in the basement, they found more. Not just from Emma, but from 2 other cold cases in the neighboring county. Trophies. David Black wasn't just a kidnapper. He was a serial predator who had been hiding in plain sight for 20 years. And he would have kept going, if not for a homeless man and his dog. The news vans arrived at the station the next morning. The headline was everywhere. "Hero Dog Solves Decade-Old Mystery." But Sarah Holloway was more interested in the scene in the lobby. Emma Miller's parents were there. They looked older, broken by a decade of not knowing. Sarah handed them the Pelican case. "We found her," the mother sobbed, clutching the pink unicorn shirt. "We found the man who took her," Sarah said softly. "He's in custody. He's confessed. He told us where she is resting. You can bring her home now." The closure was painful, but it was closure. The monster had a name, and he would never hurt anyone again. Then the parents turned to the corner of the lobby. Elias was sitting there, looking uncomfortable in clean clothes the officers had bought him. Buster was at his feet, chewing on a new bone. Emma's father walked over. He was a big man, but he was trembling. He knelt down in front of the homeless man. "You found her," the father choked out. "Buster found her," Elias said humbly. I just held the leash." "You stayed," the father said. "You camped there. You protected her evidence. You listened to your dog when everyone else would have ignored him." The father reached into his pocket. He pulled out a checkbook. "I can't bring my daughter back," the father said, "but I posted a reward 10 years ago. $50,000. It's been sitting in a trust ever since." Elias's eyes went wide. "Sir, I can't. That's blood money. I don't want it." "It's not blood money," the mother said, joining them. She reached down and stroked Buster's head. The dog leaned into her touch, sensing her grief. "It's gratitude. Please, take it. Get off the streets. Give this dog a yard. He deserves a yard." Elias looked at Buster. He looked at the scars on his own hands. He looked at the parents, who finally had an answer. "Okay," Elias whispered. "For Buster." The small cottage on the outskirts of Granite Falls had a white picket fence. It was a cliché, but to Elias it was a castle. He sat on the porch, rocking in a chair, reading the morning paper. He was clean-shaven, healthy, and the haunted look in his eyes had been replaced by peace. In the yard, a golden retriever was chasing a tennis ball. Buster was heavier now, his coat shiny and thick. He didn't dig anymore. He didn't need to. A police cruiser pulled into the driveway. Detective Sarah Halloway stepped out. She stopped by once a month, usually with a bag of premium dog treats. "Morning, Elias," she called out. "Morning, Detective." Elias smiled. "How's the hero?" "Sleeping, mostly." Elias laughed. "Chasing squirrels." Sarah walked up the steps and sat on the railing. "You know, Black's trial starts next week. They want you to testify, just about the night in the woods." "I'll be there," Elias said. "Good." Sarah paused. She looked at the dog frolicking in the grass. "You know, I asked the vet about Buster, about why he dug that night. The vet said it was impossible for a dog to smell a plastic case 4 feet down, even with a crack." Elias stopped rocking. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," Sarah looked at Elias with a small smile, "that sometimes things happen that science can't explain. Maybe he smelled the clothes, or maybe Emma just needed to be found, and she knew Buster was the only one listening." Elias looked at his dog. Buster stopped running. He looked at the woods bordering the property, ears perked as if hearing a distant whisper. Then he barked, a happy, sharp sound, and ran back to Elias, dropping the ball at his feet. "Maybe," Elias said, patting the dog's head. "Or maybe he just knew that a good dog never leaves a job unfinished." Elias threw the ball. It soared high into the blue sky, landing in the green grass of a home built on the truth.